Hello, I'm Jason Connolly, CEO of JMC Legal Recruitment, and I'm recording this video in collaboration with the Law Society and the Law Gazette Jobs. I've been asked to speak about how to sell yourself in an employer-led market. Now, what does that mean? What that means is there is less jobs at the moment than there are candidates at some levels of PQE. That's not the case at the senior end. There is still a lot of opportunity, but particularly for NQs, paralegals, and up to about 3 years PQE, there is less jobs than there are candidates at the moment. So it's more imperative than ever that you sell yourself properly in this employer-led market. So I'm going to give some advice in this video on how to sell yourself. Now, the first point I'll bring up is personal brand. Now, at any level of experience, even if you're just leaving university and setting out, thinking about what is your personal brand is something you should do even at a junior level, as then when you get more experience and go over through the years, your personal brand will get stronger. Your personal brand is your shop front. The more you build your personal brand, the more the work will find you. And I've done many podcasts over recent weeks that has talked about what should you do as a junior lawyer, what is one of the most important things, and one of the most important things is making sure that you're developing business and making sure that you're getting business development exposure and you're building relationships with contacts. That's really essential, because otherwise what you might find is if you don't build up relationships, you'll be in that pyramid structure forever, really working hard, and it can be difficult in that rat race to climb the ladder. But if you develop clients at a junior level, you'll find that partnership opportunities become more in abundance at a junior level. Also, you can look at things like an ABS or an innovative fee split model. Now, selling your personal brand doesn't just come down to your LinkedIn profile, but it also comes down to everything that you do in terms of blogs. It could come down to clients, every time you're on the phone to a different client, using the opportunity to ask for referrals. I have done other videos on how to build your personal brand and the power of the personal brand, so it is well worth watching those. Just to briefly talk about LinkedIn, it's an extremely powerful tool. A lot of lawyers don't use LinkedIn correctly. One of the most important things is making sure your profile really does sell you. Making sure that you've got your practice area, making sure that if you've got client testimonials on there, this is really powerful. When you're on LinkedIn though, it's not simply enough to just be on the platform. You want to be posting to the platform regularly, because that is then going to go out to all of your connections. And if you do get likes, that will then go out to each of your connections networks. So the power of LinkedIn is absolutely massive, and me personally, I found it to be a real work generator over the years, but it's something that you need to do often. You need to build your network and you need to make sure you're getting out regular content. Now, when thinking about selling yourself, one of the first things to do before you maybe come onto the job market is actually to step back and think about how you are going to market yourself as a candidate. Because sometimes when you're in the like a rabbit in headlights working every day, you don't necessarily always think about how are you going to sell yourself, what's my points of achievements. And what you want to make sure when you put your CV together is it isn't just a roles and responsibilities document. It should be a document that is a sales piece to sell you. That is the ultimate goal of what a CV is to do. It's to open doors and to create opportunity. Now, yes, it's important that your roles and responsibilities are on there, but what's much more important is that the sales points are on there. So when you're stepping back to think about how to sell yourself, one of the first things you should think about is, what have I done business development wise? What have I brought into the firm? And even at a junior level, you should be getting involved in business development. If you're not getting that exposure, push for it. It's your career and you've got to make sure that you get it. Even at a junior level, selling is important. One of the next things to think about is billings. You want to think about your total potential as a candidate when it comes to billings. Now, what do I mean by total potential? What I mean by that is, what is, moving forward, your projected billings. So I'll give you an example. There could be two separate conveyancers. One conveyancer has a secretary, they have a case management system, they have a post-completions department. Conveyancer number two doesn't have any of that. They bill the same amount of money, they don't have support, and they do most of their own administration. All of a sudden, those two conveyancers are very different. Conveyancer number two, I would say, has the most potential if they were both working at 100% capacity, due to the fact that if you put support in place in the next role, they're going to have much more in the way of billings potential. So it's really important when you're selling yourself to make sure you identify, what capacity is it that you're working at? What support do you have? Do you pass any work down the chain of command? Do you pass any work across? And actually break down your billings figures, because then you're going to know your full potential. And you might find that other candidates in the market are just talking about what they're billing now. You'll be going around the market talking, sounding very commercial, coming across as someone who really thinks commercially and thinks about the pounds, pences and the shillings. You'll be going around saying what your full potential is in your next role, and there is a big difference. What I would always say is come to us if you do want us to break this all down for you, and we can help you to work out how to sell yourself in the next role, and it is important. Now, you might be an NQ or someone who's junior in PQE, and what you really need to do when you come on the job market, especially at a junior level, is you need to think, what puts you ahead of the competition? Now, as an NQ, it could be things like you've got a lot of pre-paralegal experience, you've been a paralegal for years, or it could be things like you've sat a double seat. Maybe you've got involved and had a level of exposure that's just not normally heard of. But you need to think about what are your selling points, and then document those selling points down, because you need to stand out from the crowd and give yourself the absolute best chance for success. It might be a case where you want to do an area of law which is extremely popular, so maybe corporate banking, finance, commercial litigation, etc. So you want to make sure, even when you're in your training contract, you don't wait till you started your fourth seat to start thinking about how to sell yourself. Really, the earlier that you can identify your practice area, the better. The reason why is then you can hopefully sway your training contract to get more experience in that particular area, so your profile is stronger for when you qualify. Now, just to briefly talk about the CV, I have done other videos on constructing a CV, but I'll talk about it briefly now. As I mentioned, the CV is your sales piece. It's to talk about your achievements. It's to sell you. One of the most important things when it comes to a CV is making sure your achievements are actually at the top. When you list out your experience, don't use narrative, use bullet points. It's really difficult for a recruiter or a hiring manager to read through large chunks of narrative. What you should do at the top of every role is I would always put what your key achievements are in bold with bullet points, so they can't be missed. When you're constructing a CV, always do a personal statement at the top. One thing I always try to advise candidates against is using a lot of what I now call kind of corporate buzzwords: entrepreneurial, ambitious, driven. The problem with those words is they're so overused. What you want to do when someone is reading your CV, you want them to come to the conclusion that you are ambitious, you are driven, you are go-getting, you are a rainmaker, without necessarily just saying, I'm a rainmaker, I'm ambitious, etc. How do you do that? Well, one of the first things that's always good to do is tell a story. If you are going to say you're ambitious and actually put that word in the CV, then back it up. Back it up with a story, back it up with something that actually shows why you're ambitious, why you're driven, why you're entrepreneurial. Because these buzzwords now, they're overused, and I think people don't really take good notice of them. However, if you've got a story, a particular adversity that you've overcome, a particular example of something that you've done, which is great, this is your chance to sell yourself. I think a lot of the time, being typically British, sometimes we don't sell ourselves as much as we should do. But a CV is your sales document. It's your soapbox to stand on and pitch yourself. So really give it the time and attention it deserves. If you are at a junior level, I always advise tailoring your CV to the role. Don't have one multi-purpose CV that you send to everything, especially if you're trying to qualify into a certain area. Make sure you tailor the CV. A CV should be concise. It shouldn't be pages and pages long. What I always say to candidates is I don't give a particular number of pages that you should do, because at the end of the day, your experience might be vast, but making sure that it's concise is important. Now, when getting to the point of going to an interview, one of the first things I would say is make sure you prepare properly. Preparation is key to any interview. One thing I would say when it comes to preparation is, first of all, know your experience inside out. Know if you've got a vast background and you've maybe been working in the sector for 10 years and you've maybe had a couple of moves during that time, make sure you know the dates, because all too often when you speak to a candidate in an interview, they can't remember their experience properly. differently. They perhaps can't remember the dates, and there's nothing worse than being in an interview and not knowing your own background inside out. Research the interviewers. Go on the firm's website, have a look at the partners. I always think if you can find common ground with the interviewer earlier on, that's great. It might be something as simple as you both went to the same university, but finding out those common grounds, those similar threads between you and the interviewer is going to build rapport earlier on. Another thing I would do is I would watch if there's any interviews or YouTube videos, or there's different material of that interviewer speaking. Watch it, because you're going to then get a sense of their personality, the way they communicate, and that's going to allow you to feel more familiar when in the interview, rather than going into a room with two complete strangers or three complete strangers that you've never heard speaking before. At the end of the day, a lot of the interview process, if for any role, comes down to personality. I've had many examples over the past where I've been instructed on senior roles, and actually the client has hired way outside of the brief and gone much more junior, because even if that person doesn't have the technical experience, it's come down to personality and the company or firm believing that they're the right fit. Make sure that when you read the job spec, what you want to be doing throughout the interview is ticking off the points of the job spec in the interviewer's mind. Now, a job spec is a wish list. It's not normally a shopping list. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, a lot of the time, if a candidate has some experience, but not every single bit of experience that the job spec lists, they will sometimes still hire without that. So don't feel that if you don't tick every box, it's not worth applying for. Normally, you should still apply, as long as you think the role is suitable. But when you're going through the process of selling yourself in the interview, if you know the role requires a certain type of experience, or there's certain points on the job spec, make sure you give examples. So in the interviewer's mind, they're sitting there going tick, 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 tick. This is the right candidate for the role. Make sure that you let your personality come out in the interview. Sometimes when you're sitting in an interview and you've been asked a lot of questions, it's difficult. You're so focused on the questions that you're not letting your personality come out. As I said before, personality is absolutely essential. Never feel afraid in an interview to take a notepad with you with bullet points on, to make sure that you can stay on course. Make sure that if you do need to write down the question or you need to make notes, you take that time. Also, practice when it comes to selling yourself. If you need to, what you should always do as well is always speak to a recruiter. If you're dealing with a good recruiter, they should do interview preparation with you. But if you're a bit out of practice when it comes to interviewing, give yourself a bit of a practice at selling yourself, selling your background, selling whatever it is that you feel is important for the role. If you are going for an interview, we can always give you tailored prep here specifically for that role, but I'm talking very much in general terms. If you do want particular advice on how to sell yourself during this time or during the pandemic, do get in touch with us. You can visit our website at www.jmc-legal.com. I'm Jason Connolly. Thanks very much to the Law Society and Law Gazette Jobs for giving me this opportunity to talk about how to sell yourself in an employer-led market.